Welcome to the Manders Mindset podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Hi friends, welcome back to Manders Mindset. I'm your host, Amanda Russo. And you know, I'm all about having the vulnerable conversations that most people aren't having, the ones we don't hear enough. And today, we're diving into a big one, money. Let's be real. Money is one of the most stressful, emotional topics out there, but it's also one of the least talked about. That's why I'm continuing this series of raw, honest conversations to bring the topics we avoid into the light and to remind you that you're not alone. Today, I'm joined by Brad Nelson, the founder of Debt-Free Dad. Brad knows firsthand what it's like to struggle with money. Brad knows firsthand what it's like to struggle with money. He's been there, from paycheck to paycheck living, to losing his home. But he turned it all around. And now he's on a mission to help everyday people take back control of their finances, reduce stress, and live the life they actually want to live. This episode is packed with insights on why money is so emotional, why we weren't taught how to handle it, and most importantly, how to change your story around money. So, if you've ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or even ashamed about money or your finances, this episode is for you. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Manders Mindset, where we explore how shifting your mindset will shift your life. And I am here today with an awesome guest who I'm really excited to speak to, who was actually referred to us by Sean Rivers of the Growth by Sean podcast. Got a couple of awesome guests from him, so really excited to dive in today. And I am here today with Brad Nelson, who is the founder of Debt-Free Dad. As a devoted single father, he's committed himself to help normal, everyday people take control of their finances so they can live a happier, less stressful life. With the Debt-Free Dad podcast and his online courses, Roots of Personal Finance, Beyond Finances, Brad values family, outdoor adventures, and creating lasting memories. And I've listened to quite a few episodes on Brad's podcast, and he really delves into stuff we do not always talk about. So I am so excited to chat with him today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Always a fun topic with money.
That it is. So before we get into the money, I'd love if we could backtrack and you could take us down memory lane a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, childhood, the foundation of kind of how you got to being the Debt-Free Dad.
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate enough. I had a very good childhood. I feel like I won the childhood lottery, if that's what you want to say. Just great memories, had a great relationship with my mom. Unfortunately, I lost my mom back in 2007 because of cancer, young age of 57, but I was always really close to my mom. Mom stayed home part-time, was always there picking us up from school and all of that great stuff. Very involved with sports as a kid, obviously baseball and soccer, and eventually went through high school and started working at a very young age. I always loved making money. In fact, when I was in grade school, I became the janitor of my school. I went to a very small grade school and they needed someone just to clean up for 30, 45 minutes after school to help out a little bit. And I got my first job there and I wasn't even a legal age yet. They were just paying me cash. And that was my first taste of work and money. I really got this idea of I wanted to eventually open up my own business and become an entrepreneur of some sort. Sadly, when I became an adult, I got myself into the same rat race a lot of other people do, and that's paycheck to paycheck living and lots of bills, lots of debt. One of the financial lessons, I guess the number one financial lessons my parents taught us was the importance of a credit score and how good it is. And I had a great credit score, but I also had a lot of debt and payments, no savings. And I spent most of my 20s living that way. As I made more money in my career, I sold myself like I'll do better, or I'll take that extra money I make and I'll pay off my debt, or I'll save it this time. But the reality is I just experienced what a lot of people do, and that's lifestyle creep. And the car payments just got bigger. The credit card bills just got bigger. It just was this rat race I got myself into. And I finally, in my early 30s, my first marriage ended in a divorce, and I had a son at the time, Noah, who was 2. And I ended up losing my house to foreclosure. It was during the housing crisis back in 2010, 2011, 2012-ish, right there. We ended up not being able to sell our house when we got divorced because we owed more on it than it was actually worth. In today's real estate market, that's not happening right now. But back then, that's what was happening. I realized at that time the house of cards that I had built in my financial life. And it was like all that it took was just one little card to fall, and the rest of the house started to collapse. And that's when I decided to get my, stuff together when it came to this stuff and really learn how it worked, because I realized what I was doing was not working. I was stressed all the time, worried all the time, couldn't sleep. And so I got out of debt for the very same reasons a lot of other people want to get out of debt. They want to have peace of mind. They want to have some security. They don't want to have to stress so much about money. And it took me about 4 or 5 years to do it, and a lot of trial and error. I started listening to podcasts, reading books, going to seminars, and just tried to implement everything that I was learning. And it's definitely a personal journey you go through, because money is a very emotional thing. There's a lot of behaviors, habits, and choices behind it. And it took me some time to learn that about myself, but successfully became debt-free, and I have been debt-free outside of my mortgage now for 11 plus years. And going back, it all kind of ties together, because when I was that kid, I wanted to run my own business. I did never in a million years, Amanda, did I think I'd be on podcasts and teaching people about money and personal finance. But that's what I fell in love with, because as I started getting out of debt, people started asking me for help, because I was sharing my story. I was sharing how life-changing it was. And I just started sharing kind of what I was doing, helping people on the side. And I really fell in love with not the money side so much, but just how life-changing this can be and the ripple effect it can have on your life once you take control of your finances. And that's when I decided to open up my business, Debt Free Dad, coming up on 9 years ago already, which is crazy. I've been doing this full time that long. And since then, we've helped thousands of people all over the world save and pay off tens of millions of dollars with just the simple practices and some of the stuff that we teach here. It's pretty awesome.
So you've been a hard worker since the get-go. How old were you when you started doing that janitor work?
I want to say it's probably like 6th, 7th grade is when I started. Even outside of that, I was doing car washes outside of our house. I just found ways to make money. I always loved Lego. I never had any money to buy Lego. My parents never gave me any money to buy Legos. So I figured out how I could get some money to buy some Lego. And that's how it started for me. It was that motivation. And even at 14, was working at a local restaurant. I mean, I've worked and worked, and I've always loved working and creating income. It's awesome.
So now you mentioned your parents taught you the importance of a credit score. So what about that?
Mostly, I mean, my parents did their best. I think in today's day and age, this is a lot of people struggle with, is that there is a lack of education in the school system. There's a lack of education in the households. And I think what I took away from my parents' education that they gave me was, I got to pay my bills on time, and make sure you try not to spend more than you make, but always have a credit card for emergencies. And those are the biggest things that I always remember. Or you're always going to have a credit card or credit card debt. That's what I remember hearing from them. And I had great parents, but from a financial standpoint, they didn't do such a great job at teaching me how this stuff really works, because as a young 20-something, I had a great credit score. So to me, I thought I was doing great, because that's what my parents taught me. They said, have a good credit score, make your bills on time. Well, I was doing those things. But the reality is I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was depending on that very next paycheck to survive, week after week, month after month, year after year. And things weren't improving. So I didn't prioritize things like savings and retirement investing and staying out of high interest credit card debt. I just focused on a credit score. And because I had that great credit score, I thought that was the grade of how well you were doing financially. That's just not the truth.
And now, when did you start to realize that it was more than that?
Once I started really doing some self-education and picking up books and listening to podcasts and getting outside of the societal norm of paycheck to paycheck living and hearing how other people were doing it. And it's not to say that all of them were saying that the credit score isn't important. They were just saying it isn't the most important. What's most important is having a budget, living below your means, making sure you have good short-term and long-term financial goals, and a budget that's going to help you reach those, and focusing more also on the holistic side of personal finance and how money is such an emotional thing. It's behavior, it's habits, it's choices. Once I started to kind of connect all those dots, it was like your credit score can play a role in your financial life, and it will, but it isn't the end all be all.
Yeah. No, I gotcha. Now, I think a lot of people struggle with they didn't loan it. I myself, my mom did her best and explained some stuff, but very minimal. Like, you want to have one credit card, but you don't want to use it. It's an emergency type thing. Why do you think I feel like so many parents didn't educate their kids on this?
Well, I mean, it's definitely back in the day, not today anymore, but I think back in the day, there was maybe a lack of information, maybe a lack of know-how when it came to my parents, who were baby boomer generation. And I think if you look at the history, especially of credit cards, the credit card started coming out in the 50s and the 60s. And ever since then, credit card debt has just become, year after year, more and more popular. More debt products are now available. You look at buy now, pay later programs. I mean, debt has become such a, in my opinion, I think it's one of the best, if not the best, marketed products in the world. And I mean, you look at your email, you look at your mailbox, you go shopping anywhere. What is always there when you go? It's the offer of debt. Sign up for the credit card. Sign up for this loan. Sign up for this free financing. We have become such a payment-driven society. So I think that's a big part of it. Now today, I think we're starting to realize, and a lot of people are shouting from the rooftops of how important financial literacy and financial education really is. Because if all we're taking is financial education from the financial industry, well, good luck. I mean, because you're just going to be in debt your entire life because that's what they want. That's why they have marketed the credit score so well, because the credit score ultimately just means you're a good customer or a bad customer of using debt products. It doesn't score you on anything else but your relationship with debt. And so I think that's why a lot of it starts in the schools. I think schools will help, but I think it also, we as parents in the home need to understand how important financial literacy is with our kids, and that we should be teaching them financial responsibility and giving them a lot of these tools early on, even in their teenage years, especially when they start working, teaching them early budgeting skills and saving skills, showing them the power of compound interest when you invest, and really showing them how this stuff really works from the debt side and also from, the holistic side of personal finance.
No, that makes a lot of sense. How early do you think parents should be talking about this with their kids?
Honestly, you could start as early as kindergarten age. I've got a daughter who's just started kindergarten yesterday, which was awesome. And we talk about those things in open conversation with her, just having a piggy bank. And when you get money, we save. You can begin to start giving your kids this information very early on. And as they grow, there are so many teachable opportunities and learning lessons along the way that you can share with your kids. And I do this very often with my son and showing them, how money works, and just having some of those conversations, getting them involved with the conversation. And admittedly, it's much easier to do that when you have your stuff figured out. And I think the reason why parents probably don't share too much with their kids is because for most people, money is a very stressful thing. If you look at the statistics right now, money is the number one stressor in the United States. It is the thing that's causing the most stress. 47% of people say that money is the number one reason for their mental health decline. And so, you have to think about those things. So if money is that big of a stress, if it's that big of a headache for a lot of people, we're not really openly sharing and teaching our kids this stuff, because in all likelihood, we're not handling things the proper way. And I know I wasn't. Like, if I go back into my 20s, man, if I would have showed my kid how money worked, it would have been bad news, right? Because I would have been showing them all the wrong stuff. And so I think when it comes to parents, I think it's tough because we don't really know what to share. We don't really know what to teach. And so I think that makes it very difficult, especially if you're struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. But man, you can start as early as kindergarten age, and then obviously just continue that throughout their teenage years and even to early adulthood.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a good point. You mentioned that a lot of the parents don't necessarily have a good control over it, so they're not sharing it.
Right. It's something we hide. It's one of most people that there's like some crazy stories and statistics out there of what, they do these surveys of people, and people are more willing to share like their deepest, darkest secrets versus their checking account balance or how much credit card debt that they have. Because money is just such a taboo, emotional thing. And, we want everyone to think, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of us want a lot of people to think that you're doing well. And you look at social media, we celebrate our new car purchase or our latest vacation or the clothes that we bought or the dinner we went out to or whatever. But behind closed doors, statistically, 7, almost 8 out of 10 households right now, and this number hasn't really changed much over the years. I know inflation has made it harder, but 7 to almost 8 out of 10 households are living paycheck to paycheck. That means if you go down your block and count 7 or 8 houses out of 10, those 7 or 8 are just one paycheck away from financial disaster and things getting bad very, very quickly. And so that's the reality of what we really got to keep in perspective, because when we're hurting that bad and when money is stressful, when we're worried all the time, it's like the last thing we're thinking about is how can I teach my kids this stuff, But when you go on the offensive, when you start getting yourself out of debt, when you start actually improving your financial life, you start to realize how life-changing that can be. And then we have people who will come and say, Brad, it's great. You've gotten my life straightened out. This is great. I want to start teaching my kids this stuff. So what are some pointers and things that you can do there? So once as parents, we get ourselves under control, we get our finances under control, then we can start focusing on our kids. But you definitely want to focus on your finances first.
No, it's fascinating to me about how you mentioned money, like it's not talked about. And you mentioned that in Sean's podcast too, because it's so interesting to me. I always, and everybody tells me not to ask the guests this, but I ask every single guest, is there anything you don't want me to say? Anything you don't want me to ask you? Majority of the guests have said no, but the only ever response I've gotten is regarding money. Either what they make, how much their income is, what they charge. It's always something related to the finance.
Yeah.
Like people would rather talk about sex and tell me that the craziest sex stories. I've had some stories that I'm like, you are sharing this with a stranger, but they don't want to talk about money. And I'm like,
You're right. Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep.
It's a little mind blowing to me, not gonna lie.
Yeah. So true. So true.
Why do you think there's so much shame around money?
Well, again, I think it comes from a social thing. It's a very, especially in today's day and age with social media, everything's online. We want, again, to give this portrayal that we're doing great. I know this was me, so I'm going to speak from my standpoint. And again, I wasn't living this super flashy lifestyle, but based on the income that I was living, I lived in a house that I couldn't afford to live in. I drove cars that I couldn't afford to drive, even though I can make the payments, and we trick ourselves into thinking that, well, I can make the payment. But the reality is I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford the clothes. I couldn't afford the vacations that I was going on. I just couldn't afford it. But there was this ego thing. There was this pride thing. I wanted people to think that we were doing great, and we also want to always, and I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of us like to be a step ahead of the other person, right? So, and they've proven this with data and statistics, and they say they've proven if you live in a certain neighborhood, let's say you live in an affluent neighborhood, you are much more likely to live a high cost of living life living in an affluent neighborhood than say more of like your typical average neighborhood, because of the social influence of keeping up with the neighbors and what everybody else is doing and all of that. So I think that's why we struggle so much and why this is such a hard thing, because the reality is the advertised American life has become unaffordable. And it hasn't just become unaffordable just because of inflation. It's become unaffordable for quite a long time, and this whole idea of the the great house with the perfectly manicured lawn and the 2 new cars and the vacation and all the clothes and all the stuff, and giving your kids these extravagant birthday parties, all of that stuff that they say that we've got to be doing is unaffordable. The only way you can do it is with debt. And a lot of people want other people to think like they've got it figured out. They're doing really, really well with money because they look really good. They got this nice wrapper. I know I did. But the reality is on the inside, most of them are broke. And this just doesn't go for people who make normal incomes. I have had colleagues, other financial coaches that work with people like, say, on the West Coast or the East Coast in these big cities like New York, LA, these people making 7 figures. And they're like, because I would ask them the same question, like, how is their problems different than somebody who makes 60, 70, 80 grand a year, or even, 40 or 50 grand a year? And you want to know what the crazy answer is? They said, there's not one difference. They have nicer stuff. They live in a high cost of living area. But the reality is, if you look at their bank accounts and where they are financially, they're in no better position than, say, someone making a lesser income. So that's the other thing we trick ourselves in is this whole idea of, well, if I make a big income, that's going to solve all my problems. The reality is we don't see that. We actually see people who make higher incomes just spend more money. And they have the same types of habits, right? So, yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So the solution isn't to make more money.
Not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily bad to make more money, but I think making more money without a good financial plan and what to do with that money is the challenge. Yeah. I just had this conversation with an older gentleman. I was at a restaurant and I see him often, and he's an older guy. He's in his mid-70s. He just retired, worked in the car industry all his life, and he made great money, made well over $100,000 a year. And he's like, he got to talking about what I did, and I explained it to him, and he's like, I have so many regrets. I have so many regrets that I didn't do better with managing the amount of money I had. I never paid attention to it. I just spent, didn't have a really good plan, didn't have any, just nothing, no idea for retirement. And now he's living on Social Security. And actually, I was just talking to him yesterday, and he said it was such just a wake up call of just, I went from $100,000 a year to making less than $30,000 a year. And that is just like this huge life-changing thing. And so income is not the driver behind financial wellness. It's how you manage the income that you're making. And then once you get that down, making more money is great, because then you get to start putting in all these little different areas that are driving you to increase your wealth and build financial freedom in your life.
I gotcha. No, that makes sense. I feel like that's kind of like people who win the lotto, you'll win a big amount of money, and then suddenly, maybe not right away, but slowly over time, they're in debt again. Like one of my best friends in high school, her mom won $1 million, and everybody's, they're going to be set now. Next thing you know, 6 months later, she was in debt again. She couldn't pay the house payments, and everybody's like, how? She just won $1 million. And she didn't know how to manage it. She wasn't used to that much money and didn't know how to control it. I guess
100%. Yep. 100%. For most people, a windfall of cash, for the typical, even though we all feel it would be a life-changing thing, in most cases, it's very short-lived because they don't know how to manage it and where to put it, leave it alone. They don't have the behaviors and the habits created to manage the money. So if you can't, and this way I want you to think about it. And I know in today's day and age, like with the way the inflation is and how expensive things are, and I get that things are hard for a lot of people, but if you can't manage the current income that you're making, what's to say you can make or manage double that? And a lot of people say, well, of course I could, because life would just be so much easier. But the reality is, for most of us, it wouldn't change anything. You would have more stuff, likely, a lot more payments, and that's what we typically see. And again, that's not everybody. We can't put everybody in the same bucket, but for the majority of people, they would likely still struggle. You look at professional athletes who have these huge contracts, right? And there was a statistic, I don't know what the statistic is anymore, but it was near 80% of NFL players were broke within 3 years of leaving the league. And these people are making more money than we will ever see, right? And not all of them, but a lot of them, but within 3 years of leaving. And that doesn't come down to not having enough. That just comes down to mismanagement and not knowing what to do with it. And the same thing's happening with people who, again, start out in their 20s making 30, 40, then they get those wage increases, their career improves, they start making more and more and more and more money. But the habits, the choices, the behaviors, the plan behind that financial plan, the lack of a financial plan, it doesn't really do anything different for them. It doesn't change anything.
Okay.
And then you look at the statistics of happiness and they say, anything after $80,000, it ain't going to make you any more happy. $80,000 is the threshold. They say if you can get it to $80,000, you'll obviously if you make 50 to 80, you'll have increased happiness in your life. But anything after 80, they say that's the threshold. That's where they see your happiness doesn't drastically increase if you all of a sudden made $150,000. So that's like the more of the holistic side and really what comes down to being really important in your life.
Wow. I never knew that. 80,000. There's not. Wow.
It's right around there. Yeah, it's right around 80 grand.
Okay. That makes me think of, I listened to one of your episodes about how financial stress is worse than divorce, going through divorce.
Yep.
Which
it's
is
worse
really...
than divorce, bereavement, losing a family member. It's worse stress than all of those things. It's crazy.
That's mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Why do you think that stress is worse?
Well, again, because money, it impacts every area of your life, if you think about it. And money is at the center, and it doesn't mean that at the center means it's the most important, but without proper management of your money, it affects you as a person. It affects your relationships. Money and personal finance fights are one of the top reasons for divorce in the United States. It affects your parenting skills, because obviously if you're stressed and worried about money on a regular basis, you have lack of patience, can't provide for your kids the way that you want to, so you feel guilt and shame because of some of those things. You look at the statistics of how much we worry about money at work, the countless hours that are lost because of our worry at work of personal finance issues and things going on at home. Then you also think about, well, I'm not performing my best at work because now I'm worrying so much. So you probably have maybe less promotions, less raises. In fact, a lot of the people that we work with over the years, is pretty amazing how once they get their finances in order, all of a sudden they're getting promotions, they're getting raises, they're getting other opportunities that they weren't getting before. And that's because they're not spending so much emotional energy just worrying and stressing about money, because they got a plan, they know what they're doing, and they're actually making better progress. And that is so life-changing when you can reduce and get rid of a lot of that financial stress and worry. So if you think about how money is connected just to everything, that's why it is one of the most stressful things. It pretty much creates the livelihood that we have. So without it, you realize I'm going to lose things. So we stress.
No, that's a fair point, that it affects everything from your relationships to what you can do, whether you can send the kids to daycare or you can't, all the things.
All the things, even down to the basic necessities of life. And those are the ones, Amanda, that are hard. When we start working with people that are, their electric bill is going to be shut off, or, they're having trouble buying food and things like that. So it isn't just always the nice things that you're going to lose, but it is sometimes the basic necessities too that can be worrisome.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Now, so what would you say is a first step to try to reduce the stress in people's lives?
Yeah, so I think one of the first kind of, actionable items that I would suggest to anyone I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck, I'm tired of stress, I want to start doing some things different. I think the first thing is really getting a handle and becoming more aware of what your current financial life looks like and where things are going. So first thing I always tell people to do is let's go back and look at where you're spending your money. All right. Most people have no idea. In fact, we had a statistic shared in our podcast, upwards of 50% of the millennial generation, we're just counting them, 50% of them have no idea what's going on with their bank account. That's what they say. So we need to fix that. And that's going on along with all the other generations too. It's not just the millennials. But we need to get a really good pulse as to what's happening with our money. So the first thing I would suggest is Go back and print out the last 3, 6, maybe if you want to go even further and do an entire year, do 12 months of your bank statements, your credit card statements. Look at your PayPal, your Venmo, your Cash App, your Apple Pay accounts. Look at anywhere. If you're using cash, start keeping your receipts. Like, really figure out where all your money's been going. And once you do that, then you can start categorizing what you are spending in certain areas. Like, how much money are we spending on groceries? How much money on average are we spending on gas every month? How much money on average are we spending on going out to eat, or subscription services, or prescriptions, or whatever it might be? This really gives you a good understanding of where all your money's going. And Amanda, time and time again, there hasn't been one person that's ever come back to me that's done this. And they said, Brad, I knew exactly where every penny was going. It's always the complete opposite of, Brad, I am so sick to my stomach seeing what I found, seeing how much we were spending on going out to eat, seeing how much money we were wasting on subscriptions we weren't using anymore, or wasteful spending at convenience stores because we didn't have a good grocery plan or food plan or whatever. It's like all of these different things, because it's so easy to spend money nowadays. And we always use this, well, it's only a few dollars. Well, a few dollars here, a few dollars there, a few dollars here. And you eventually just begin to forget how much a few dollars is slipping through your fingers all the time. In fact, there was that meme going around a long time ago. What does it take to spend every day to waste $10,000 a year? And it only takes $27.40 a day in spending to waste $10,000 a year. And so that's why I think it's the best first step for anybody, is to really get a good understanding of where everything's going. Once you have a good understanding of where everything's going, now it's super easy to put together like a monthly budget, because you know what you're spending on everything. A lot of people's mistakes of starting a budget is they start a budget without really knowing what their spending habits are or what their averages are. And then what happens, they do their first budget, they get to the end of the month, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, that didn't work. I guess the budgeting doesn't work for me. Well, no. These are just unrealistic numbers that you started with. We need to really get a good understanding. So it takes some time to do this, but I think it's one of the best things that people can do. And then they can start to figure out, based on what they find, is what am I going to keep? What can I shop around to get cheaper services for? And what can I get rid of? And you begin to organize your financial life from a monthly basis of what your expenses are and what your income is. And then you can start moving forward based on that.
Okay. No, that makes so much sense. I talk about all the time how so many people are just on autopilot, and they're unaware of so many things, whether it's just decisions they make, things we spend money on, whatever it is. But you can't change something that you're unaware of,
Right.
So, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I'd love if. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you were going to say something. I know what I got in my head.
I was just going to say, once you go through that, then the next step is the most important part, I think, is really sitting down and figuring out, like, what the heck do you want? And not what everybody else wants, but what do you want? What are some short-term and long-term financial goals for you? And when I say financial, it doesn't mean financial products and things like that. It's like, where do you want to live? What kind of life do you want to live? What do you want for your kids? What is, and if you're younger, I know this is a crazy thing to think about, but what does retirement look like to you? And, just really kind of starting to consider some of these things. I think one of the things that causes most people to struggle living paycheck to paycheck is a lot of us are just kind of living for today. We don't really have any clear vision of where we're heading, though. And when you don't have that, it's so easy to spend money. The marketing and advertising of products is so incredible now. You look at especially social media and TikTok Shop and all of these. They are so good at getting us to spend money, and it's even going into debt for things that we didn't plan on going into debt for. And so without a good plan, without good short-term and long-term goals, it's easy to let emotional and impulsive spending wreak havoc on your life. So once you understand what your expenses are, then really sit down and create that vision of where are we going? What do we want to achieve? And how are we going to use our current income in order to get there? And once you start doing it, and again, this is why it took me 4 or 5 years to get out of debt, because this is so easy to say, but it's hard to do because of the behaviors and the habits that go along with it. It takes time to rewire your brain. So you are going to mess up at times. You are going to bust your budget. You are going to spend when you shouldn't, but you learn from that and you just get better the next time and you just stay committed. But the way you stay committed is by being vested in that small and short-term goal that you have, or that, that long-term game plan of what your financial life it needs to look like, because you'll recommit, get back on the wagon, get back to work again.
I really like how you mentioned, what do you want? I think that's so key. Like, we're all different, like, even when it comes to experiences, like, what experiences do you want to spend your money on? What do you want to do at the end of your life? How do you want to look back on it?
Yeah. Well, and it's not only that too, it's also breaking away from this whole, what everybody else wants. Get rid of all that. What do you want? And then work really hard at not caring what anybody else thinks. If you look at Bonnie Ware's, if you've ever guys read this blog post, awesome blog post by Bonnie Ware, it's the 5 regrets of the dying. And Bonnie Ware was a palliative nurse who helped people pass in hospice. And she started to document what these people had regrets over. And one of their 5 regrets was caring too much about what other people thought, or allowing people to dictate how they were living their life, and not doing essentially what was going to make them happy. So worrying too much about other people's opinions and things like that. So if you think about that, that's incredible to me. Also, the 5 regrets, not one is, I wish I had a bigger house. Not one is, I wish I drove a better car. Not one is, I wish I had every Stanley Cup color out there. Not one is, I didn't go on these glorious vacations. Not to say don't go on vacation. I love them. Those are great life experiences. But it was the free things in life that they regretted. But the reality is when you don't have good control of your finances, it takes away from all of the things that truly are important to you. It really does. For instance, if you want to have a better relationship, get your money in order. I guarantee you it will improve your relationship. You want to be a better parent, improve your money. I guarantee you it'll make you a better parent. It's amazing the ripple effect it'll have. And I love that. I love that blog post because it truly shows us, like, these people live their life and they're telling us, like, hey, these are the things that you should be focusing on. And sadly, when your money is out of control, it pulls us away from a lot of those things that are the most important things.
Wow, I've never read that blog post or heard of it. But it makes sense that, like, not caring what people think, because you might have lived life differently or made different choices, if you didn't think about what Joe Schmo on social media thinks about what kind of car you drive.
Yep. I can't tell you how many people made fun of me for wanting to get out of debt, because it's such a thing. Like, what do you mean you're not going to have credit cards? What do you mean you're not going to have car payments? People literally would make fun of me for it. And you don't want to know what? At first, it was a little weird. Today, I'm okay with it. I don't really care. That the whole thought process of the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I can promise you it is greener on the other side when you have less financial stress. You will be so much more happier, so much more content. You'll have so much more energy to focus on other things. It is a pretty amazing place to be. And again, these are normal everyday people who are doing this too. This isn't, I want to be clear, Amanda, these, like, the stuff that we're talking about, these ideas that we're sharing, aren't reserved only for the people, again, who are making just high incomes. I mean, we work with people from all different walks of life, all different types of incomes, all different types of situations and challenges. And it's been proven time and time again that if they just practice these simple things, again, the timeline will be different for everybody because we all have our own different types of income and challenges, but the results will still come. It just takes time. And I truly believe that anybody who makes, again, we're keeping poverty out of it because poverty is a very real thing. But people who make these average incomes, and typical American incomes, they don't have to struggle. And I know, again, I'm going to say it again because there's this idea out there, and I get that it's hard, but inflation is stopping people from doing all this. Then I still wouldn't have people coming through our doors saving and paying off $7,000 in 6 months. These are normal people. Like, they're doing amazing things. So it is possible to still make progress and have less financial stress, even in today's economic times.
Now, I'm curious, why were people making fun of you for trying to get out of debt when you first started?
Because it's weird. Debt is the American way. Paycheck to paycheck living is the American way, of course. And again, we also throw up our walls in a way when people want to improve, because again, we tend to associate with people who are in our same circle. And what do they say? What is it saying? You're the average of the, 5, 6, 7 people you hang out with, or something like that. Yeah. So when you become the person that wants to become out of that average, they want to pull you all back down, right? And so it's a weird thought. Now, in today's day and age, when I started back in 2011, social media was around, but it wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is today. And I think the message of financial freedom, the financial, literacy and having good control over your finance, I think the messaging out there today is so much better than it was, 12, 13 years ago. And so I think the idea of it has become more widely accepted than, say, when I first started 12, 13 years ago. Yeah, there were financial people out there like the Dave Ramseys and the David Bachs and the Susie Ormans, and some of them were out there that were big on mainstream media that were talking about some of this stuff. But I think social media, podcasting, I think the internet has opened up the window to have normal people like me, people who are living normal lives, who live in normal houses, who drive normal cars, who have normal family life challenges, to open up their voice to say, hey, look, we are doing this. Well, this is how we're doing it. And you can do it too. There's no reason why you can't. And I think that's the biggest difference between like me and a lot of other people like me who teach this stuff. And some of these bigger people out there is like, we're normal everyday people. You wouldn't be able to pick us out of a crowd. I probably drive older cars than most people do. And I do things just much different than most people do. But that's allowed us to maintain this debt-free lifestyle that we live.
Now, I'd love if we could backtrack a little bit, but you mentioned you got divorced around when you were 30 and the house foreclosed. So where'd you go from there?
So and this would have been, I'm trying to think of the year. That would have been 2011, 2012-ish. I moved out. I ended up renting for almost 9 years after that, I think. Was it 9? Oh, was it like 8 or 9 years? And so ended up finding a really affordable place to live, rented, wasn't the ideal location, got my life back on track, ended up meeting my second wife, and we ended up getting married back in 2014. And that's right around the time, it was 2013-ish, is kind of right around that 2013, 2014 is when I finally became debt-free, because I was working on getting out of debt before I lost my house because I knew it was a bad thing. But it was losing my house that really was like, I really need to start doing this better, right? So I married my second wife, and we ended up I had my son Noah at the time for my first marriage, and we ended up having my daughter Avery back in 2018. Avery was born with a condition called HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, which is essentially a condition where is developed because she lost oxygen during birth, and it caused a brain injury. She ended up having like 24 to 30 seizures within the first 24 hours of her life. And it was pretty grim at first. In fact, they told us that, there's a 50-50 chance she may not even make it out of the hospital. And my wife, Sarah, had perfectly healthy pregnancy, no concerns. This was something that was just a huge blow to us because of how healthy of a pregnancy she had. And 4 days later, they finally were able to do an MRI on our daughter, and they told us that it's not looking good. She's not going to live a normal life. She'll likely be in a wheelchair. She'll likely be on feeding tubes. She's not going to dance. She's not going to be a normal kid. She's never going to go to normal schools. And they pretty much prepared us for the worst outcome that we could get. And again, huge devastation. And so how money kind of fits into this, though, is that because we had control over money, because we were debt free, I worked at home. I had started this business. Sarah was working from home. She had started a business because we were both debt free. We both started doing our own thing. It allowed us to have freedom and flexibility of schedule and time to work with our daughter. And that's exactly what we did. We started therapies right away. And this went multiple times throughout every single day, throughout the first several weeks of her being a newborn. And I mean, there was a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of stuff that we've done over the years. But fast forward to today, Avery started kindergarten yesterday. She started in a normal school. She's doing great. She's walking, she's talking, she's dancing. We send her up from gymnastics. She's doing absolutely fantastic. She's nothing like what they said that she would be. She was later diagnosed with cerebral palsy because those are some of the conditions that can be caused from HIE. So she does have some muscle tension and tone in her, mostly suffers mostly in her left hand. So she struggles with fine motor skill movement in her left hand and things. So we do a lot of occupational therapy and things with her. And then she also does have a speech delay, which they did tell us that would happen because as she overcomes so much physically that she's had to overcome, speech tends to kind of come behind that, which we're working with her on speech, but she's also doing absolutely fantastic in that area too. So we're very, very excited about where she's at and couldn't be happier, honestly. In fact, we just went camping over, which this, as we're recording this, it's the Wednesday after Labor Day. And we went up to a campground and she's like swimming on her own and 4 feet of water, diving, getting dive sticks and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it's pretty, when you sit back and you look at how much of a miracle it is, it's pretty great to be a part of.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. She's doing wonderful. So we're really excited about that.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, but as parents, you know, I mean, if I take this to the money side again, if I would have had gone through this back in my mid-20s in debt, having all the financial problems I was having, I don't feel like she would have been where she is because we have been fully involved with her entire life. In fact, yesterday, outside of 4K, which she did last year for half days, you know, she's been with me since she's been born. I mean, we've spent every single day with her and we did all the therapies with her and we were able to be a big part of that. Not to say that there's anything wrong with daycare and childcare programs and things like that, but I don't feel like she would have gotten nearly as much intensive therapy as we've been able to give her as her parents to make sure that she is where she needs to be. And money and having control over our money is what afforded us to be able to do that. And again, we're just normal, everyday people. I still make a pretty normal income. I'm not super wealthy, rich. I'm just handling my money different. And it's allowed me to be more present in a lot of other areas in our lives and also be prepared for a lot of, you know, bad things that are going to come up too.
It gave you time almost.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And that's something that I'll never regret. You know, I look back on all the hard work that we've put in to get our finances in the best place. And it is some of the best work that I've ever done in my entire life because of how much it's given us outside of money.
Yeah. I talk about that all the time, how that's the only thing we can't get more of. You could have all the money in the world. You can't buy more time. When your time's up, it's up.
It's
SOL, you know?
Yeah, you got it. Right.
So what would you say was like your biggest mindset shift to help you get out of debt?
I think it was that I would always relate money with more stuff. And it's like you just said, having control over your money equals more time. And it really does. There's so many people that I've worked with, even in my own life, you know, working as many hours as I did, as much as I love work. I also like to take steps back now. I'm 45 years old and, you know, I also like to not work as hard. I also like to be more present with my friends, my family and my partner and my kids and not be working and doing things. So I think to me, I think the biggest mindset shift for me over the years has been more money does not mean more material possessions. It means more options. It means more choices. It means more time, more freedom. And that's the way I kind of look at things is I have created almost like this filter for my life when I am approached with buying something or an opportunity. I always look at it as, is this going to make me have to work more and take more time away from the things that I want to do? Or is this going to give me more time? Is this going to help me spend more time doing the things that I want to do? And so I think that's the biggest mindset shift. And I think in this day and age and in the society that we live in, you know, we're such a consumer driven society. It's more and more stuff. Buy. I mean, a perfect statistic is, this is crazy. There are more storage facilities, independent self-storage facilities, than there are of Starbucks, McDonald's, and Burger King's combined. Yes, there are. In fact, there was a statistic a while back. It probably is even more now. But you could put every American citizen under one roof of all the storage facilities nationwide. If they put them all together, you could put every single citizen under that roof and they could all stand with their arms out without touching a single person. That is how much storage we have. So again, you know, and again, I'm not saying that everyone uses storage facilities just to store their stuff. I get there's moving situations where you need storage. I get all that. But I think you look at the home sizes. Home sizes have nearly tripled since the 1960s. And what happens when you got bigger homes? You put more stuff in them, right? So again, going back to your mindset shift, I think that is it. It's more money does not have to mean more stuff. For me, it means more time, more freedom, more choices, and more experiences, which I think is really fun.
You've mentioned how money is emotional. Why do you think it's emotional?
Well, just everything every purchase that you make, most purchases that you make, there's the emotion there driven. Like when you buy a car, there's emotion involved, right? There's emotion in a vehicle purchase. I like this car. I like the way I look in this car. I want people to see me in this car, right? There's emotion behind going out to eat and food and buying food or going to the grocery store, being emotionally driven to make a purchase in a grocery store. Shopify did some statistics, and they said that 40 to 80% of all of our purchases are made out of impulse and emotion. 40 to 80%, 50% of all grocery is bought on impulse and emotion. So it's not necessarily the money that's emotional, it's the products they make emotional, which essentially gets us to spend money. And that's why it's an emotional thing. And I also feel, there's also the negative side of emotions too. When we are living paycheck to paycheck, when we are struggling, when there is a lot of stress is part of that emotion. We feel that. We feel embarrassment. We feel the shame. We feel the worry. It is a very emotional thing that you're going through. On the same side, though, on the other side of the emotion is you can be feeling more content. You can be feeling more grateful. You could be feeling less stress. And so there's a lot of emotion that's driven with this.
Yeah. No, I gotcha. Now, so what'd you say to somebody that has almost the mindset of impulsive spending, because this is how they've basically like the YOLO mindset? Because I've noticed quite a few colleagues or friends of mine, this late 20 era, have this, not necessarily saying like YOLO, but basically, I'm going to spend money because I don't know what tomorrow brings.
This is a tough one because I struggle with this too. Part of my background story too is I did lose my second wife, Sarah, to suicide several years ago. And I have gone through this mindset shift too of I'm having her pass away at a young age of you do only live once. Your days are numbered. And I have noticed a shift in my spending patterns because of that. But I think there's a balance. I think you need to have a balance of this. And I think that's what I want people to like. I guess people who have this mindset of you only live once, I'm not going to worry about the debt. I'm not going to worry about the payments. I'm going to enjoy life now. The reality is, man, I used to have kind of that same mindset when I was in debt, living paycheck to paycheck. And I got to tell you, I got out of debt. I focused on this stuff and I enjoy my life a heck of a lot more than I did back then. But at the same time, I'm not consuming more things. I'm mostly taking advantage of more time, more experiences, going on more vacations than I used to. And again, because I want to have those moments. Those are the things that are the most important. It's not the stuff. And from you only live once, it's a struggle. But I think there needs to be a balance in your life of good financial health, good financial habits and behaviors, but also give yourself the freedom and flexibility within your financial life to be spontaneous, to have some of those moments as well. I'm definitely not one of these fans of the scorched earth, get out of debt, and do everything at all costs to do that. I feel like that can work for some people. For the majority of other people, it just can't, especially if you've got kids. And so I think there needs to be a balance of we need to get ourselves out of debt. We need to get ourselves in the better practice of creating a habit of saving and building emergency funds and all of that stuff. But also at the same time, we need to live life a little bit too. But I promise you, you will live life more fully when you're out of debt and you're not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. You will be amazed at how much more present and how much more you will enjoy your life without having to worry about some of that stuff. Because again, it's how much, it's interesting that we will justify that you only live once, so we're going to make this purchase. You only spend about maybe five, if you're lucky, 10% of your time actually doing those activities. And then the other 90% of the time worrying about how you're going to pay for some of those things, right? And those debts and those things that you've incurred. So I think it comes down to a balance.
I gotcha. I'm sorry about your wife. Now,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
did that change your habits? with money after that at all?
Oh, I mean, there certainly is that emotional, you go through grief and there's some emotional spending patterns that can happen. But because of what I do and because of my background and because I've been teaching this stuff for so many years, I knew it was coming. And so I had mentally already started to prepare. Like I knew, like, during the grieving process, at some point, I'm going to be triggered to buy this or do this or do this. And I did some of it, but I also have put a wraps on a lot of it and said no to a lot of it because I knew I'm not doing this because it's healthy. I'm doing it because it's coping with the grief, and I don't want to do that. I wanted to find healthier ways to go through that. And so I didn't want to cope with spending, because if I just cope with spending, eventually spending runs out and it's, well, now what do we do? Right. So I knew that those types of coping patterns can come up, and some of those things can happen. I mean, just coaching other people who have gone through loss and grief. And so I would say it affected me to a somewhat of a degree from a spending habit pattern, but for the most part, no, I still practice the same habits that I've always had, and some of the things that we've always done, budgeting and saving and still doing the things that I've done. Did I pause on some of those things for a little while until I got my head right? Absolutely. But I think, like you said earlier, time is one of the best things that you give yourself, especially even in my daughter's situation. I would say the same thing when it came to Sarah's passing is I got this blessing of time because I had my financial affairs in order, because I had money put away for these types of events and disasters that can happen, large emergency fund put together. So I could take a step back from work. I could focus on my kids. I could focus on me and grieving and healing and moving forward in some way and building this new life that I had to build. So I think time and time again, especially in the bad times of life, this work has served me so well in taking control of my finances and helping us move through some of these things that we're all going to face in life at some time.
Now, I don't remember which episode it was, but I heard on your show one of the guests talking about a loss she went through, and by not having debt, she had the ability to take more time off from work to be able to grieve and just feel the shit that she was going through, you know, which we don't all get to go through. There's so many companies, like bereavement time, you get like the wake and the funeral, and then you're supposed to be back to work.
Yeah.
What the fuck is some of that, know?
How are you gonna move through something like that so quickly? And I did start working a couple weeks after, but it was very limited. And I really put most of my focus into exercising, getting out of the house, making myself do stuff, because you can. And again, I know every death is different and how significant it plays a role. But when it comes to a spouse, you could put yourself into a hole, into a cave, and not want to come out. And I had to force myself not to do those types of things. So again, I think if I was put in the situation again, going back into my mid-20s, having to go through the same thing, I can't imagine the financial stress. I would have lost everything. I would have lost all of everything that we owned, because she made a significant income. Like she made more money than me. I mean, we still made normal incomes, but she, again, we still had a mortgage to pay. We still had bills to pay. We still had things, right? But if you put all credit cards and car payments and all that stuff that I had back in my 20s, like I would have lost everything. But being all my vehicles were paid for, and we had money put away, we had an emergency fund put away, we had life insurance, we did all of these things to prepare. And because of that, it allowed our family to be able to grieve in the most healthy way that you can, and to move through that.
That makes a lot of sense. Time, I think, is the biggest thing, because even regardless of how much money you have, you can't buy it. Like, it's not a tangible thing,
Right.
Regardless of what you have for resources, whether you're bartering, whether you're spending money, you can't buy it.
Right.
No matter what.
Yeah. And the one thing I will piggyback on this, just get on my soapbox a little bit. If you don't have it from a financial standpoint, go get life insurance. Get life insurance. I can't say it enough. Even get something as cheap and inexpensive as a term life insurance policy. And I see this tear apart families, and it is so unnecessary. I get, based on your health situation, you may not be able to get insurance, but if you are healthy and able, make it on your to-do list, like this week. get yourself some life insurance, because again, if you have someone depending on you for income and you're their means to survival, think about it. If something happens to me, how would my kids, how would my family, how would my spouse, how would these people still be able to survive? And the reality is, if you don't have any life insurance, you don't have anything to give them when you leave, things get very hard very, very quickly. And I've coached so many people and families that have gone through this. And it is heartbreaking to see, because it is so avoidable by just getting some proper life insurance put into place. So again, I don't care what kind you get. I would just suggest term, because it's cheap. It gets the job done. But if you want to look at whole life insurance policies and things like that, you can. But for most people, term is what it does. And go get it. This is like giving your family the biggest hug that you can when you're no longer there. And it allows them to be able to, again, grieve in the most healthy way possible, I feel, move through that process to help them rebuild their lives.
Wow. Okay. That makes sense. Now, what would you suggest for somebody who living paycheck to paycheck, doesn't have much of a savings, and is in debt? Maybe they've got a little bit of a budget. They know where they're spending some of the money, but how should they go from there?
Yeah. So like I said, going back to the kind of the first actionable item I think you could take is go back and track the last 3 to 6, again, maybe 12 months of expenses, figure out where that is. Get yourself on a really good written budget. And budgeting is a learned habit. It's not something that we're just good at. Creating the budget is probably the easiest part. It's following it. That's the hard part, right? It's actually doing what you've planned to do and kind of keeping your eyes off of all these shiny objects that are out there wanting you to spend money. Once you have that done, then it's just a matter of your own particular situation. But in most cases, most people lack a savings of any kind. In fact, the last statistic I had read was about 63% of the population can't handle a $500 emergency expense without going into debt. And that number hasn't changed since like 2017. That number's been about the same. So my suggestion is, you're never going to get out of debt. You're never going to improve your finances if you don't stop depending on debt to save you during hard times. So get yourself some sort of a small savings account put together. I would start with, of $1,000 to $3,000. And then once that $1,000 to $3,000, then you have something to fall back on. You can stop using credit cards and when you need a couple $100 for an emergency that came up. This gives you the opportunity to breathe during life emergencies and things that pop up, and then use that money to pay for those emergencies.
Okay. That makes sense. I gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you speaking with me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
I have, yeah.
So he's got a podcast called On Purpose, and he ends it with 2 segments, and I end mine with those 2 segments as well. First segment is called The Many Sides to Us. There's 5 questions, and they need to be answered in 1 word each.
Oh my gosh.
It's fun. Number 1. What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Confident?
Number 2. What is 1 word that someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you?
Authentic.
Number 3. What is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself? Number 4. What is 1 word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you?
That's a good one. I'll go with cocky.
What is 1 word you're embodying right now? Second segment is the final 5, and these can be answered in up to a sentence. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
Man, that is a tough one. Man, I'm stumped. There's so many of them. This is hard. Time is limited, so don't waste it.
Why is that the best advice?
Because it's true. Absolutely true.
Okay, fair enough. Number 2, what is the worst advice you've heard or received?
Ugh. Man. Well, since we talked about money today, I would say you only live once, go into debt, take the payments.
Okay. Number 3, what is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Again, going back to what we said today, I would say stuff and just having things.
Okay. Number 4, if you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone were reading it, what would you want it to say?
I would say, in short, that I provided value and helped people improve their lives.
Okay. If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
Oh my gosh. One law.
Good questions, I know.
These are good. Man, I would say just don't bully, be nice. I think that's why is because you have no idea what people are dealing with on the inside. You have no idea what someone's gone through, what their life history has been. And it doesn't cost you anything to be nice. It doesn't cost you anything. And it can be life-changing in so many ways to that other person. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Now, where can the listeners connect with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you want to find out more information, I think one of the best places that you get started is checking out our podcast, Every Dad podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. But, if anything that triggered you today of, hey, I want to hear more about this stuff, learn more about this stuff. And we have 5 hosts on our show, and we put out 2 new episodes every single week. And we're all normal, everyday people on the show. And I think that's the thing that I want to really drive home is that normal, everyday people are still winning and taking control of their finances in any paycheck to paycheck living. And you can too. We also have a lot of free resources and workshops right on our website that you can check out too at everydad.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I love how you emphasize that y'all are everyday people because I completely relate to that. So I love that.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. Now, before we close out, I do always like to leave it to the guest. Any final words you want to share with the listeners?
I would say, just kind of piggybacking on what I just said, is that there is hope out there. Like I said, finances right now are the number one source of stress. They typically rank in the top 3, but right now with the way expenses and inflation is over the last couple of years, they've definitely have been number one. Like I said, you can get out of debt. You can improve your life. And it takes time. It takes a lot of hard work, but the tools, the resources are out there. And if you're willing to do the work, you too can eventually reach financial freedom. Whatever version of that you want it to be, you can have that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
And thank you guys for tuning in to another. Hey guys, before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to take a second to highlight some of the most powerful points from my conversation with Brad Nelson. We talk so much about how to break free from paycheck to paycheck living, to why financial stress affects literally every area of our lives, and even how to start teaching kids about ways that they can save money and about money in ways that actually make sense. Now, if you're thinking, okay, that all sounds great, but where do I even begin? Don't worry, I've got you. I'm about to break down simple, actionable steps you can start using to take back control of your money and give you more peace of mind in your life. Let's dive in. First of all, and this is key, know where your money is going. No more guessing. Go back through the last few months of your bank statements, credit card statements, Venmo, PayPal, anything you use to send money or to receive money. You might be surprised and even a little horrified, but awareness is everything. Even like Brad mentioned in the episode, sometimes we don't become aware of where our money is going until something catastrophic or something negative happens to force us to. I didn't create a budget in my life until I lost my job back in 2023. And I didn't have awareness of where my money was going. You know, I talk about awareness, guys, in every area of life. But if you are not aware of something, you can't change it. If you don't know where your money's going, you can't change and spend it or budget it differently. Second, build a mini emergency fund. Start small. Brad mentioned $1,000. Even starting with a few hundred is a game changer for when life throws something unexpected at you. Maybe you run into a car issue and you need to replace something. If you have $500 in an emergency fund, that's debt you don't have to use. It's now I'm not going into debt for this fund. It'll make a difference. That's the second actionable step. Third, budget without the bullshit. Let's be real here. Budgets can feel restrictive, but they don't have to. Use what you've learned from step 1 to create a budget that works for you and your life. It will likely take a few tries to create this budget and to stick with it. So don't beat yourself up if it's not perfect right away. Next, ask yourself, what do I really want? Forget what everyone else is doing. What kind of life do you want? What's important to you? Use that to guide your financial decisions. Whether it's saving for a dream trip, cutting back on impulse buys, or just having some peace of mind, it is knowing what you want your life to look like. And not what society thinks you should. That fancy new car, maybe that is meaningful to you. Maybe it's not. Maybe that trip that you want to take your parent on that you never got or imagined you'd be able to do, maybe that's meaningful to you. What do you want? I don't know. You got to figure that out. Next, balance is everything. Brad said it best. You don't have to go full force and cut out all of the fun from your life. Be intentional. Find the balance between enjoying life now and setting yourself up for a less stressful future. Brad even emphasized not denying yourself an enjoyable life, but also having the balance of not getting into debt. Next, teaching what you learn is really key. If you've got kids or younger people in your life, maybe it's your nieces, maybe it's your nephews, start having those money conversations. The younger you are, when you understand this stuff, the easier it is to break the cycle and make smarter financial decisions. Brad and I talked about how a lot of these money conversations were not being had when I was a kid, when he was a kid, because our parents didn't understand. But if you understand something about money, about finances, teaching that to the younger generation is how we break this cycle. Lastly, this hit me hard. But remember, money buys options. It doesn't buy happiness. It's not about the stuff or the paycheck. It's about the freedom, the time, the choices. The choice to have the time, as Brad and I talked about, to take care of our loved ones. If you get sick, being able to utilize that time. When you've got that under control, life feels so much lighter. And here's the thing. When you start managing your money and being intentional with it, you will feel the weight lifting off your shoulders. And you'll realize that it's not about having it all, but it's about creating a life that works for you. So take that first step, no matter how small, and start building toward a future will you have the freedom to focus on what really matters to you. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope it helps you have less financial stress. I hope it helps you look at money in a new light. And I'd love to know, what is that one step? What is that one step you're going to take? We tend, as people, as human beings, to be more intentional and act upon things when we have some type of an accountability buddy that we are checking in with. So reach out to me. I'd love to know, what is one actionable step you are going to take from this episode. You can find me on social media, The Breathing Goddess or Manders Mindset. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you left me a rating, left a review, and shared this episode with anyone you think needs to shift their mindset around money. Thanks, guys. Until next time. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.